Hi, friend. I'm really glad you're here. So, the first three episodes was Hilma af Klint to introduce you to an artist who was the first female artist that brought abstract art in this modern age. It was not Kandinsky, it was Hilma af Klint. And I revealed the big secret that these were not only spiritual beings, but also thought forms that she was seeing and creating. She had been able to cross the threshold and perceive in the spiritual world. Part two in the Thought Form series was Gollum and Schmegel, and my personal favorite, the picture of Dorian Gray, to give you a picture of how our thinking creates our being. And the third in the series of thought forms was last week, and that was the dark night of the soul. So these are the steps to lead us now. These steps were preparatory and need to be listened to if you want a deeper understanding of thought forms and how it affects us personally and within the theater of our personal dynamics. Those three are the introduction to this one. And I really recommend that if you're listening to the podcast and you haven't listened to one, two, and three, they are the ground that you can stand on for the rest of your life as you work with those concepts if they're new to you. So the threshold. The threshold is a boundary. It's a crossing place between one state and another, between life and death, between sleeping and waking, between laughing and crying. These are boundaries. These are thresholds. And we know this because we are crossing thresholds all day long in our states of emotion, anger, and laughter. The two masks, tragedy and comedy, spiritually, it marks a passage between ordinary consciousness and non-ordinary reality. And this is what Michael Harner from the Foundation of Shamanic Studies, that's what he called it. Ordinary reality and non-ordinary reality. So there is a door between those two aspects of consciousness. That door is the threshold. And in the goddess traditions, we would say that it's where the veil is thin. And if you've watched Outlander, and then she grabs the lintel stone, she crosses a threshold. So in Tibetan Buddhism, they have a term called bardo, and the bardo means an intermediate state between death and rebirth, between one moment of awareness and another. Some also speak of crossing the ocean of suffering as a threshold to awakening. The barzak, in Islam, the barzak is the veil between this world and the next. It's the boundary between the soul and the body, between waking and the realm of the angels. The Mirage, the Prophet Muhammad's night journey through the heavens, is a classic visionary threshold passage. In Judaism, threshold moments often appear as encounters, capitalized. Jacob wrestling with the angel, Moses before the burning bush. These are the boundary states between old identity and new or divine commission, a divine request, a divine beckoning. The Shekinah, who I love, the Shekinah is a divine presence who often appears at the thresholds, tent flaps, mountaintops, desert crossings. And the Shekinah, or the Divine Sophia, has many, many poems written to her by great poets, artists throughout centuries. The Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross is a threshold experience when all the spiritual light is withdrawn and the soul must walk by faith alone. And that was last week. You can recap that at the Dark Night of the Soul because we covered Thomas Merton, St. John the Cross, Rudolf Steiner, Carl Jung, Jim Carrey, and many more. In the Christian Gospels, in Matthew 7:14, we have the straight gate and the narrow gate. Those are thresholds. Few enter, and it leads to life. So before we even get to the guardian, we meet, what do we meet in fairy tales? The troll under the bridge. Rumpelstiltskin. The big bad wolf. Alice in Wonderland. Oh, I'm late for a date with the Duchess at 8. The White Rabbit. So in fairy tales, these aren't just stories for children, and they are stories for children. I was raised on fairy tales, but they're esoteric blueprints for moral development, for passing through moral, spiritual, psychological gates, for being able to pass through psychological, esoteric, spiritual gates of transformation. And before we ever meet the guardian of the threshold, we meet the devil, the witch, the solitary crone at the crossroads, the forest we could see as the soul life, animals, darkness, creaks and crawly things. That's sort of a picture of our inner self, isn't it? The dark forest, where Dante goes, right? Where Parsifal gets lost for 9 years. So you could say the devil could be the lesser guardian, the one that is the warder, Warder, a warding gesture. Do not cross here unless, and then in the fairy tale, you'll get 3 tasks usually. So in a fairy tale, the threshold can be a gate, a border, a crossing, a bridge, a river crossing, or a dark house, like Hansel and Gretel. And in the dark house is a witch, a beast, or a troll that tests you. And so that's sort of a picture of the devil. And that's the first thing that we meet. And that's why we have the picture of Dorian Gray. That's we have those wonderful images of Schmegel becoming Gollum. These are crossings of our soul. This is our soul in transformation, choosing good or bad. Every day, all day long, we are creating a being. So in many fairy tales, the crone or the old man many times would be cloaked, so you don't really know what he looks like or what she looks like. And they can be resembling old and warts on the nose and dark and hags, no teeth. But these are enchanted beings. These are riddles of consciousness. These are tests of our character. Tests of our character. I like that. They can give us a task, a riddle, or a curse, offering knowledge, a power, or a contract. These are spiritual dramas where the hero or the heroine must choose selfishness or sacrifice, fear or integrity, the willingness to do without knowledge of winning the deed. Rudolf Steiner said that fairy tales preserve deep truths in symbolic form. The fairy tale comes from spiritual vision. They speak in images because the child's soul is still near the spiritual world. Trolls and witches are karmic blockages and shadow forces. Trolls under a bridge, witches in huts, the wolves in the woods. These are the personification of karma, distortion, and fear. In Three Billy Goats Gruff, the fairy tale, the goats must cross the bridge, a literal threshold guarded by a troll. The troll is the test. And the crossing only happens when one confronts or outwits the guardian. In the witch's house in Baba Yaga, everybody loves Baba Yaga, that house on chicken legs. Baba Yaga and her house seems very threatening, but they hold the key to personal transformation. If the heroine can hold her ground, the trolls under bridges, the witches in the huts, the wolves in the woods, these are personifications of karma, distortion, and fear. They often appear grotesque or frightening, but they carry hidden truth. To pass, the soul must show discernment, humility, or courage. Baba Yaga terrifies, but she's also the one who knows how to reach the soul's goal. Found cross-culturally, we have Anubis, a jackal-headed god of the dead who weighs the heart against the feather of Maat to judge whether the soul may pass into the afterlife. And in my class that I have online at ChristinaWestArt.com, The Shaman's Eye, I show you how I painted an intuitive painting of Saint Michael holding the spirit twins with the feather of Maat and the goddess Maat at the top of the painting. And there's a scale weighing the feather of the twins, the sacred twin warriors, that I've also done some vlogs on. Yama in Tibet is the Lord of Death. He holds the wheel of life and he mirrors the soul's karma, guarding the threshold between death and liberation. Hemdel in Norse mythology stands watch at the Bifrost Bridge, the road between Midgard and Asgard, to alert intruders and worthy souls alike. And you'll find this in my Olaf Ostesen, the book I wrote for the Holy Nights Dream and Art Retreat, and also that Olaf has to meet the three beasts before he can pass over the Rainbow Bridge. And we have, of course, Saint Michael, the warrior of light, guards the heavenly gate and weighs the souls. And in Greek mythology, we have Charon, the ferryman of Hades, who demands a coin to carry the dead across the river Styx, a ritual toll to pass into the realm of the gods. And so many times they would put a coin on both eyes, and those coins were to give to Charon, who you would give so he would take you across the river. Styx was the river of forgetfulness. Tracking this Thought Forms blog 1, 2, and 3, you have a better understanding, I'm very sure, of what we're talking about, of this picture of a soul's journey from youth to maturity, not just physically and emotionally, but spiritually. So Rudolf Steiner, in his wonderful book, How to Know Higher Worlds, A Modern Path of Initiation, he has an entire chapter on the Guardian of the Threshold by Rudolf Steiner. Among the important experiences that accompany an ascent into the higher worlds is that of meeting with the guardian of the threshold. In reality, there is not only one such guardian, but two, one known as the lesser and the other as the greater. The student meets with the former when, in the manner described, our thinking, feeling, and willing starts to loosen. And this means that we are very close to meeting the guardian of the threshold. The lesser guardian of the threshold is an independent being. It did not exist before the individual has arrived at this particular point in their evolution. It is the individual's creation. Only one of its essential functions can be described here. Indeed, it is no easy matter to furnish a complete description. First of all, let us present in a narrative form the meeting of the occult student with the guardian of the threshold. Only by means of this meeting does the former become aware of the separation of the threads that connected his thinking, feeling, and willing. Hence, a terrible spectral creature, in truth, it is this that confronts the student. The student will need all presence of mind and all the faith in the security of their way to wisdom, the path that they have followed, their studies, their spiritual studies, which they have had the opportunity to acquire during their previous training. The guardian proclaims his significance in something like these words. Hitherto, powers that were invisible to you have watched over you. They worked so that in the course of your life, your good deeds brought their reward, your evil actions, their disastrous results. Through their influence, Your character formed itself out of your experiences and your thoughts. They were the instruments of your fate. It was they that ordered the measure of joy and pain, which was meted out to you in any one of your incarnations, according to the conduct in earlier lives. They ruled you by the all binding law of karma. Now they shall set you free from a part of their constraint, and a portion of that which they have accomplished for you must you now accomplish for yourself. In the past, you have borne many hard blows from fate. Did you know where they came from? Each was the effect of a pernicious deed in a life in the past. You found joy and gladness, and you partook of them. They too were the fruits of earlier deeds. In your character, you have many beautiful qualities, many ugly flaws, and both of these you have woven for yourself out of your past experiences and thoughts. Till now, you did not know of this. Only the effects were revealed to you. But they, the karmic powers, beheld all the deeds of your former lives, all your obscure thoughts and feelings, and thus they have determined what you are now and the manner in which you live. But the hour has come when all the good and evil aspects of your past lives shall be laid open before you. Until now, they were interwoven with your whole being. They were in you, and you could not see them, even as with physical eyes, you cannot see your own physical brain. Now, however, they detach themselves from you. They emerge from your personality. They assume an independent form which you can observe even as you observe the stones and the flowers of the external world. And I am that very being which has found for itself a body wrought of your noble and ignoble deeds. My spectral robe is woven according to the entries in your life's ledger. Until now, you have borne me invisibly within yourself. Yet it was well for you that this should be, for the wisdom of destiny, which was hidden from even from yourself, has herefore worked toward the extinguishing of the hideous stains that were upon my form. Now that I have emerged, that hidden wisdom also departs from you. It will henceforth trouble itself no more concerning you. It will now leave the work in your hands alone. It is for me to become a complete and splendid being, if I am not indeed to fall into decay. If this, the latter, should occur, then should I drag you also down into a dark, ruined world. If you would avoid this, then let your own wisdom become so great that it can take over to itself the task that other wisdom, which has been hidden from you, has now departed. When you have passed my threshold, I shall never leave your side for a single moment. From now on, when you do or think anything evil, you will straightway discern your guilt as a hideous, demonic distortion of this that is my form. Only when you have made good all your bygone evil deeds and have so elevated yourself that further evil becomes a thing impossible to you, only then will my being be transformed into glorious beauty. Until now, I have only emerged from your personality when death recalled you from an earthly life. But even then, my form was veiled from you. Only the powers of destiny who watched over you could behold me, and they were able, in accordance with my appearance, to build in you, during the interval between death and a new birth, all that power and that capacity wherein a new terrestrial existence you could labor at the glorifying of my form for the assurance of your progress. It was on account of my imperfection, indeed, that the powers of destiny were driven again and again to lead you back into a new incarnation upon earth. If you died, I was there. And according to me, did the lords of karma fashion the manner of your rebirth. Only when, through an endless procession of lives, you have brought me to perfection, shall you no longer descend among the powers of death, but having united yourself absolutely with me, you shall pass over with me into immortality. Thus do I stand before you here today visible, as I have always stood invisible beside you in the hour of death. When you shall have passed my threshold, you will enter those kingdoms which else would have opened to you only at physical death. You will enter them with full knowledge, and from now on you will wander outwardly visible upon the earth. You will also move through the kingdom of death, which is the kingdom of eternal life. I am indeed the angel of death, yet at the same time I am the bringer of an imperishable higher life. Through me you will die while still living in your body, to be reborn into an immortal existence. The kingdom that you now enter will introduce you to beings of a superhuman kind, and in that kingdom, happiness will be your lot. But the first acquaintance to be made in that world must be myself, I that am your own creation. While I lived upon your life, now through you I have grown into a separate existence, and here stand before you as the visible gauge of your future deeds, perhaps too as your constant reproach. You were able to form me, but in doing so, you have taken up the duty of transforming me. And then Rudolf Steiner goes on to say, what has here been presented in a narrative form, one must not imagine to be merely something allegorical, but realize that it is an experience of the student, which is the highest degree actual. The guardian will warn him not to go further if he does not feel in themselves the power necessary for the fulfillment of those demands which have been set forth. Although the form of the guardian is so frightful, it is nothing but the effect of the student's own past life. This awakening is brought about by the mutual separation of thinking, feeling, and willing. It is an experience of the deepest significance when one feels for the first time that one has produced a spiritual being. One has produced a spiritual being. The next thing to be aimed at is the preparation of the occult student so that he can endure the terrible sight without a vestige of timidity, and at the moment of meeting, really feel her power to be so increased that she can take it upon herself to effect, with full realization, the glorifying of the guardian. As a result of this meeting with the guardian of the threshold, if successful, is that the next physical death of the student is an event entirely different from what death has been before. She consciously goes through death, whereby she lays aside the physical body as she lays aside an outworn garment or one that is grown useless on account of a sudden tear. This physical death is now only an important fact, as it were, to those who have lived with her. Those perceptions are still restricted to the world of the senses. For them, the occult student dies, but for herself, nothing of importance. In her whole environment has changed. The entire superphysical world into which she steps already stood open to her before death, and it is the same world that after death confronts her. And the Steiner ends this chapter on the lesser guardian, the meeting of the lesser guardian. It is more than merely a figure of speech to say that after the guardian of the threshold has uttered the first communications, there rises up from the place where he stands a great whirlwind which extinguishes all those lights of the spirit which had hitherto illuminated the pathway of life. At the same time, an utter blackness engulfs the student. It is only broken by little rays of that stream forth from the guardian of the threshold, and out of the darkness resound his last admonitions. Step not across my threshold before you are assured that you can illuminate the blackness by yourself. Take not a single step forward unless you are certain that you have the sufficiency of oil in your lamp. The lamps of the guides, which up until now have followed you, will now in the future be absent. Afterwards, the student has to turn around and direct her gaze backward. The guardian of the threshold now draws away the veil that has hitherto hidden the deepest secrets. The student, she now sees clearly where she has been guided so far, but it dawns upon her that she will have no more guidance. This is the second warning received at the threshold from the guardian. No one can attain to this vision unprepared, but the higher training, which generally makes it possible for a person to press on, puts her simultaneously in a position to find the right moment, the necessary power. Indeed, this training is so harmonious of a kind that the entrance to the new life can be made to lose its exciting and tumultuous character. The experience at the threshold for the occult student, attended by a foreshadowing of bliss, which is to form the keynote of her newly awakened life. This sensation of new freedom will outweigh all other feelings, and together with this sensation, the new duties and the new responsibilities will seem as something which must needs be undertaken by this person at her particular stage in life. It has already been shown how important for the individual is the meeting with the so-called lesser guardian of the threshold, because she then becomes aware of a super physical being which she has herself created. The body of this being is constructed out of the results, hitherto imperceptible to her, of her actions, feelings, and thoughts. It is these invincible forces that have become the cause of her destiny and her character. It is then quite clear to the individual that in the past, she herself laid the ground plans for the present. Her nature now stands revealed to a certain extent before her. For instance, it comprises particular inclinations and habits. She can now understand why she has them. She has met with certain blows of fate. She now knows whence they came. She perceives why she loves one and hates another, and why she is made happy by this and unhappy by that. By means of the invisible causes, the visible life is made comprehensible. The essential facts of life, too, such as illness, health, death, and birth, unveil themselves before her gaze. She observes how she has woven before her birth the causes which necessitated her return to life. And now on, she knows that being within herself is constructed in the visible world after an imperfect manner, in which can now only be brought to perfection in the same visible world. In no other world is there an opportunity of working at the upbuilding of that being. Further than this, she sees how death cannot sever her lastingly from this world. For she would say to herself, once I came for the first time to this world because I was a being that needed the life here lived in order to evolve those attributes which could not have been developed in any other world. Here must I remain until I have evolved myself, whatever can be done and be attained. I shall only become, at some far-off time, a fit worker in another world if I have developed in the phenomenal world all the qualities which pertain to it. Among the most important experiences of the initiate is that which occurs when she first learns to know and cherish the visible world in its true value. And this knowledge comes to her by her very insight into the superphysical world. So from this narrative, it becomes obvious why the threshold to the superphysical world is watched by a guardian. In no case may a true vision of that sphere be granted to a person who has not yet acquired the necessary faculties. And for this reason, at each death, a veil is drawn over the realities of the other world when the person enters it, while still incapable of working within it. She would only behold them when she is ripe for it. Thus, the first guardian of the threshold stands as the replica of the individual in her double nature. Therein are mingled the imperishable and the perishable. And it is made clear to her how much she lacks before she can attain the sublime form of light, which may once more inhabit a pure spiritual world. And this completes the first chapter on the Lesser Guardian. When you hear something like this today, it's been the last 100 years has been the revealing of these ancient wisdom traditions in various levels of opening the book. And after hearing this beautiful chapter on meeting the lesser guardian, which in psychological terms we call the double, but we realize is really a supernatural, physical, super physical being that we have actually created, exactly like the picture of Dorian Gray, right? And this only touches the surface of the mystery wisdom traditions. So with that, I'm going to say goodnight because I've got to do a lot of editing and see if I can get this up for you tomorrow. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next week. We have another very wonderful session next week. Make sure to tune in, and if you like this journey that we're going on, if it piques your interest, if it's something that you go, oh my gosh, this explains so much, please subscribe. Thank you so much. Good night. Let's get creative.